The night was cold, the kind of cold that crept into your bones and stayed there. The wind howled through the narrow market streets, carrying with it the faint rattling of broken signs and the smell of dust. Most shops were shut, their metal doors locked tight. Only a few street lamps worked, casting long, thin shadows across the cracked stone path. Daniel, a human trader, walked quickly with his coat pulled close. He had just finished selling a few crates of spare ship parts and was heading back to his small room above the repair dock. He liked this time of night because the streets were usually empty, quiet. But tonight, the quiet was broken by something unexpected. A voice. A soft, trembling voice. It was so faint at first that Daniel thought it was the wind playing tricks. But then he heard it again. A small, desperate whisper. He slowed his steps and turned his head, scanning the shadows. The voice came once. More, a little clearer this time, the words trembling as if each one was too heavy to speak. "Please, human, help me." Daniel froze. From the corner of a dark alley, a small figure stepped forward. She was tiny, no more than 7 or 8 years old, with skin a pale shade of violet that shimmered faintly in the lamplight. Her big golden eyes glistened with tears, and she hugged herself tightly as if trying to hold in her own fear. Looked up at him, her voice breaking. "They locked my mother in a cage. Please, you have to help." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He'd seen desperation before in this galaxy, the kind born from hunger, from war, from cruelty. But something about this child's face made him feel an ache deep in his chest. He stepped closer, keeping his voice calm. "Where is she? Who locked her up?" The girl's small hands gripped the edge of his coat, almost as if she was afraid he might disappear. "Slavers. Bad ones. They took her because she couldn't pay. They said they will sell her tomorrow." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. Slavers. He had dealt with their kind before. Cold. Dangerous people who saw lives as nothing more than credits. Before he could say more, a sudden sound made the girl flinch. Heavy boots, the low hum of alien voices. From the far end of the street, 2 tall figures appeared. Their armor was patched with rust, but the weapons they carried looked sharp enough to kill in an instant. Their reptilian eyes scanned the street. Like predators, the girl's grip on Daniel's coat tightened, her whisper urgent now. "They're looking for me." Daniel's instincts screamed that he should walk away, that getting involved with slavers was a fast way to end up dead. But when he looked into those wide golden eyes, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. He crouched down to her level. "Do you know a way to your mother that they won't see?" She nodded quickly, her small head jerking toward a narrow gap between 2 old buildings. "I can take you, but we have to run." Daniel glanced once more at the approaching slavers. They hadn't seen them yet, but they would soon. He gave the girl a quick nod. "Go." They slipped into the gap, moving quickly. The path was barely wide enough for Daniel's shoulders, and the walls on either side were damp with moisture, smelling faintly of mold. The girl moved fast, like someone who had been through these backways before. Her bare feet made no sound, while Daniel's boots echoed softly against the stone. The further they went, the darker it became. Above them, the light from the market faded until only the faintest glow of the girl's skin lit the way. Her voice came in quick bursts as she explained the path. "We'll go behind the old spice shop, then down to the cellar. That's where they keep the cages." Daniel's stomach turned at the thought. He could already imagine rows of prisoners locked in metal bars, sold to the highest bidder. As they turned another corner, sudden metallic clang echoed through the alley, making the girl stop. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, scanning the darkness ahead. For a moment, the only sound was their breathing. Then came faint footsteps, not from behind them, but ahead. The girl's eyes widened in fear. "They've put guards in the tunnels." Daniel tightened his grip on the small wrench he kept in his coat pocket. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He leaned close to the girl and whispered, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." She nodded, her lips trembling but her small hands clenching into fists. The footsteps grew louder. Shadow moved in the faint light, tall, broad-shouldered, blocking the narrow path. The guard's eyes glinted as he spotted them, His voice was a low growl. "Well, what do we have here?" Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding, knowing that one wrong move could end this before it began. The girl's mother was out there, locked away, running out of time, and Daniel wasn't about to let her disappear into the dark without a fight. The guard's shadow loomed over the narrow alley, his scaled hands curling around the handle of a jagged blade. Daniel kept his body between the man and the girl, his stance steady though, his pulse raced. The guard tilted his head, his reptilian eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You're far from your kind, human," the guard said, his voice like gravel. "And that little one-she belongs to my boss." The girl's hand gripped the back of Daniel's coat, tugging gently, as if urging him not to speak. But Daniel's voice came low and sharp. "She's not yours." The guard stepped forward. But before he could block the path entirely, the girl darted to the side. Slipping into a narrow crack between two walls so small, Daniel would have sworn no one could fit through it. She called softly, "This weakly." Daniel moved before the guard could react, sliding into the gap after her. The walls scraped his shoulders as they twisted and turned. The space lit only by faint slivers of moonlight filtering through. Cracks above. Sound of the guard's footsteps faded behind them, placed by the quiet drip of water from somewhere deep in the stone. The girl didn't slow, her bare feet barely making a sound. "These paths are old," she whispered. "From before the market was built, the slavers don't know them all." Daniel followed her through a maze of twisting corridors, some so tight he had to turn sideways to pass. The air was damp and carried the scent of old earth. Faint carvings marked the walls strange, flowing symbols that seemed almost alive in the dim light. "What are these?" Daniel asked, as his fingers brushed the markings. "They're from my people," she said without turning. "Stories of our homeworld, before we were taken." Her voice trembled on the last words. She pushed on. They came to a small chamber where the ceiling had partially collapsed, letting in a pale shaft of moonlight. Daniel noticed a discarded blanket, a broken cup, and a faint smell of cooked grain. Someone had been here recently. "This is where I hid last night," the girl said, looking down at her bare feet. "I couldn't go back. If they caught me, they would put me in the cages too." Daniel's chest tightened, but he didn't speak. Instead, he crouched beside her. "How much farther to your mother?" The girl pointed toward a narrow tunnel in the far wall. "Through there, then down. They keep the cages in the lowest part, where it's cold and no one hears the cries." They entered the tunnel, the air growing heavier with each step. The stone underfoot turned to damp metal plates, and Daniel could hear a faint rattling of head chains. Moving in the dark, the girl slowed, her shoulders stiff. "We have to be quiet now. The guards change in shifts, but sometimes they sleep by the cages." Daniel nodded, moving silently behind her. Soon, the tunnel opened into a grated walkway overlooking a wide underground chamber. Rows of cages lined. The floor below, each holding shadowy figures curled on the ground. The air was thick with the smell of rust and unwashed bodies. The girl's gaze locked on one cage near the center. Even from this distance, Daniel could see the outline of a woman sitting hunched, her head bowed, a chain around her neck. The girl's whisper was barely audible. "That's her." Daniel's hand tightened on the railing. Somewhere below, a guard shifted in his chair, his weapon resting across his lap. The only thing between them and the cage was a long metal stare, the knowledge that if they were caught, there would be no second chance. The girl looked up at Daniel, her golden eyes fierce despite her fear. "We can do it, right?" Daniel didn't answer. He just looked down into the shadows and started planning the most dangerous rescue of his life. Daniel crouched low, studying every detail of the room below. The cages were arranged in 2 long rows, each one built from thick metal bars corroded with rust. A single lamp hung from a chain in the center, casting a sickly yellow glow that left the corners drowned in shadow. The air was heavy with dampness, and somewhere in the darkness, water dripped slowly onto the floor. The girl tugged his sleeve, pointing toward the cage in the middle. Through the dim light, Daniel saw her thin, frail, her violet skin dulled to a pale gray from exhaustion. Her head was bowed, hair tangled around her face, and her wrists were rubbed raw from the heavy shackles. She didn't look up, but he could tell she was still breathing. "That's my mother," the girl whispered, her voice trembling between hope and fear. Daniel's jaw tightened. One guard sat dozing in a chair at the far wall, a long shock staff. Resting loosely in his lap, his boots were up on a wooden crate, head tilted back as he snored softly. But Daniel knew. Sleeping guard could still wake in a second if startled. The grated walkway creaked under his boots as he and the girl moved. To the stairwell. She clung close to him, her small feet making no sound at all. Halfway down, Daniel froze. One of the prisoners in a nearby cage stirred, their eyes locking onto him. The prisoner's lips moved, forming a silent plea for help, but Daniel quickly shook his head, raising a finger to his lips. The prisoner stayed quiet, but their gaze followed every step. At the bottom, the smell hit harder, a mix of rust, sweat, and something sour that made the back of his throat tighten. He motioned for the girl to stay behind a stack of crates and stepped toward the cage. Her mother raised her head at the sound of his footsteps. Her eyes widened, faint recognition flashing in them when she saw the girl peeking from behind the crates. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, Daniel placed a finger to his mouth and mouthed quiet. He crouched by the lock. It was an old mechanical type, not one of the newer biometric ones. Good, because that meant it could be picked. But before he could start, sound shattered, the fragile quiet. Metal scraping against metal. Daniel's eyes snapped to the guard. The man was no longer asleep. He had shifted in his chair, his reptilian eyes glinting as they narrowed toward the shadows. Slowly, he rose to his feet, staff in hand. Daniel's hand slid into his coat pocket, gripping the small wrench he'd carried for years. His heart pounded, not from fear for himself, but from the knowledge that if he failed now, the girl and her mother would never see the sky again. The guard stepped forward, scanning the room. "Who's there?" His voice was low, dangerous, and each step brought him closer to the cage. The girl's mother's hands tightened around the bars. Her eyes locked on Daniel's. She shook her head slowly, silently begging him to leave before. It was too late. But Daniel's mind was already made up. Walking away was not an option. Somewhere above them, the faint creak of the walkway sounded again, as if someone else had entered the basement. Whoever it was, Daniel could feel the tension. In the air rising like a storm about to break, and storms always left wreckage behind. From the far corner of the basement, heavy footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. The guard stiffened, stepping aside as a much larger figure emerged from the shadows. The newcomer's presence filled the room before he even spoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, his scaled skin marked with deep scars, and eyes like molten copper. A jagged scar ran across his jaw, making his smile look even more cruel. In his right hand, he carried an electric staff, its tips crackling faintly with blue energy. In his left, a chain hung loosely, the end of it studded with hooks. He stopped a few paces from Daniel, his gaze sweeping from the human to the little girl hiding behind the crates. "Well," the slaver said in a voice deep enough to rumble. "Through the floor, I was wondering why my little prize had gone missing, and now I see a human decided to play hero." Daniel didn't move. His grip tightened on the wrench hidden in his coat, but his stance stayed calm. But the woman. "Go," he said evenly. "I'll walk away." The slaver's laugh was low and dangerous. "Walk away? You don't understand the game you've stepped into? That woman is worth more than your ship, and the child though. The child will fetch a price that would make you dizzy." "Why would I? Let them go when I can sell them both by sunrise?" The girl's mother's voice cracked as she gripped the bars. "Please leave before he..." Silence. The slaver barked, slamming the staff against the bars. A burst of blue sparks lit up the cage, making her flinch and fall back. Daniel took a single step forward, his voice cold now. "Touch her again, and you won't get up next time." The guard beside the slaver shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his boss, but the slaver's smirk only widened. "Brave words for someone trapped in my den. You think you can walk out of here with them? I could kill you now and no one would even bother to drag your body out." The air between them felt thick, the low hum of the electric staff filling the silence. The girl's eyes darted between the two men, her small hands clenched into fists, her breathing quick and shallow. Then, without warning, the slaver tossed the chain aside and started walking toward Daniel, each step slow but deliberate. "Tell you what, human," he said. "Drop whatever you're holding, get on your knees, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to see them sold." Daniel's mind worked fast. Fighting him here was suicide, but if he could provoke him, get him close enough, he might stand a chance. Behind the crates, the girl's lips moved soundlessly. She was pointing toward the slaver's belt where a small metal key dangled from a loop. The cage key. Daniel didn't answer the slaver's demand. Instead, he took another slow step forward, his wrench hidden at his side, his eyes locked on the man's belt. One wrong move, and it would all be over, but one right move, and they might just have a way out. The slaver stopped just a breath away from Daniel, his copper eyes glinting in the dim light. The electric staff hummed at his side, faint arcs of blue crackling between its tips. He tilted his head, studying Daniel like a predator toying with prey. "You've got spirit," the slaver said, his scarred smile curling wider. "I almost hate to waste it." Daniel's eyes never left the key on the slaver's belt. His pulse thudded in his ears, his grip on the wrench so tight it hurt. Timing was everything. 1 second too soon, and he'd be dead. 1 second too late, and the chance would be gone. The girl stayed hidden behind the crates, her golden eyes locked on him, silently urging him to do something. Her mother still crouched in the cage, gripped the bars so hard her knuckles turned pale. The slaver raised his staff, as if to jab Daniel back, and that was the moment Daniel moved. He stepped in close, his free hand grabbing the slaver's wrist, twisting it hard while his other hand yanked the wrench upward in a sharp strike. The staff clattered to the floor with a burst of sparks. The slaver roared in fury, but Daniel didn't give him a chance to recover. He shoved the man back into the guard, sending them both stumbling, and lunged for the key. His fingers closed around the cold metal just as the guard regained his footing. "Run," Daniel shouted to the girl, tossing the key toward her. It landed at her feet, the metal ringing against the floor. She snatched it up and sprinted to the cage. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the lock, the mechanism stiff from rust. The slaver charged, his shoulder slamming into Daniel. The impact sent them both crashing into a stack of crates, splintering wood and spilling fruit across the damp floor. Daniel rolled away just as the slaver's clawed hand slammed into the ground where his head had been. The cage door swung open with a loud metallic groan. The girl's mother staggered out, her legs unsteady from days of confinement. But she stayed upright, leaning on her daughter. Daniel scrambled to his feet, grabbing the fallen electric staff. He swung it hard, the blue energy crackling as it struck the guard across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. The slaver snarled, his eyes burning with rage, but Daniel planted himself between him and the freed prisoners. Up the stairs, Daniel barked. The girl and her mother moved quickly, the child half dragging her parent toward the stairwell. Daniel backed toward them, swinging the staff to keep the slaver at bay. The man lunged once, twice, each time forced back by the sizzling arcs of energy. As they reached the stairs, a shout rose from above, more guards, boots pounding toward the basement. Daniel's heart sank. They weren't out yet. "Go," he shouted again, pushing the mother and child ahead of him. "Don't stop." The sound of metal on stone grew louder from both above and below. They were being closed in from two sides, and the only way out now would take every last scrap of luck and every ounce of fight they had left. The stairwell shook under the thunder of boots above. Daniel grabbed the girl's mother by the arm, half carrying her as they climbed, the little one racing just ahead. Behind them, the slaver roared orders, his voice cutting through the clamor. Like a blade, they burst out into the night air, the sudden bite of cold hitting their faces. The market was alive now, not with shoppers, but with chaos. Crates toppled as frightened merchants shoved their goods aside, fleeing the shouting and the glow of weapons charging up. "Keep moving," Daniel urged, steering them into a narrow lane between stalls. The girl's small hand clung to his sleeve, her golden eyes darting everywhere from behind. A sharp crack split the Iran energy bolt, slammed into a wall just above Daniel's head. sending shards of stone raining down. He ducked, pulling the others with him as they veered sharply into another path. The slavers' men were fast, their boots pounding on the cobblestones, shoving aside anyone in their way. One vaulted a table and lunged, nearly catching the girls. Arm before Daniel swung the stolen electric staff in a wide arc, the crackling tip slamming into the attacker's side. The man crumpled. But another took his place instantly. The smell of roasted grain and burnt metal mixed in the air as they dodged through a cluster of cooking stalls. A pot of boiling stew toppled, splashing across the ground and sending one pursuer slipping with a howl of pain. Daniel didn't look back. They reached the outer section of the market where the streets widened, but that also meant less cover. The gate to the open docks loomed ahead, lit by the pale glow of early dawn. Freedom was there, but so was the last line of slaver guards. Blocking the exit with rifles leveled, the girl's mother's voice was weak but steady. "We can't go back, Daniel. We'll die if we do." He scanned quickly, spotting a towering stack of fruit crates by the gate. The burst of speed, he slammed the staff into the base of the pile. The crates tumbled forward in an avalanche of rolling produce, scattering the guards and knocking two to the ground. "Now," Daniel shouted, pushing the girl forward. They sprinted through the brief gap, the dock air rushing in around them. But before they could reach the safety of the shipyard, a shadow fell across their path, the slaver himself, blocking the way. His eyes burning, and his hand gripping a long, curved blade. The slaver stood in the middle of the dock road, his breath steaming in the cold morning air, the curved blade in his hand catching the faint light of dawn. His copper eyes locked on Daniel, and the cruel smile spread across his scarred face. "You've made me lose good merchandise. Human," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Now, I'll take your life instead." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between the slaver and the girl with her mother. The electric staff hummed in his grip, its blue arcs dancing along the metal. Behind him, the little one clutched, her mother's waist, her golden eyes wide but unblinking. Refusing to look away, the slaver lunged, his blade slicing through the air. Daniel blocked with the staff, the clash sending a jolt up his arms. The force drove him back a step, but he pushed forward again, striking low, forcing the slaver to stumble around them. The dock was waking up merchants peeking from doorways. Dockhands frozen mid-step, watching the fight unfold. Slaver attacked again, faster this time, his strikes wild but powerful. Daniel dodged one, blocked another, then swung hard, the electric tip catching the slaver in the ribs. The man roared in pain, his blade clattering to the ground. Daniel didn't hesitate. He shoved the staff into the slaver's chest, the blue energy flaring brighter until the man crumpled to the dock, motionless. For a moment, there was only the sound of the sea and the distant cry of gull-like birds. Then heavy footsteps approached human security officers in black armor, drawn by Daniel's emergency beacon. They scanned the scene, quickly securing the fallen guards and dragging the slaver away. One of them looked at Daniel. "These two are with you." Daniel glanced back at the girl and her mother. The child's hand was still holding his sleeve, her small fingers trembling, but her face carried something new trust. He nodded. "There. With me." The officer stepped aside, clearing the path to the docks, as the first rays of sun spilled across the harbor. The girl's mother took Daniel's hand, her voice soft but steady. "You didn't just save us, human. You gave us back our life." Daniel smiled faintly, leading them toward the waiting ships. "Then let's make sure no one ever takes it from you again." Behind them, the market slowly returned to its usual noise and bustle, but for three souls walking toward a new dawn, everything had changed.